Coming up on The Returned, how did he describe heaven?
Heaven is fundamentally a state of mind. When Jesus Christ talks about the kingdom of heaven is within you, this is what he's talking about.
For those who have never heard of Emanuel Swedenborg,
I would say that he was first real documented crossover of spirituality and science. How do you solve the big problems that nothing else is solving? How do you get it so that life can fix the stuff in life that needs fixing? And I think that's where the opportunity is.
I believe my audience needs to hear this. Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and light workers from around the world. Before we begin, you may notice my background looks a little bit different today. I'm in a makeshift studio for the next couple episodes. My family and I have been currently evacuated from our home due to the fires in British Columbia, Canada. But before we even start, I would like to send my love and prayers to everybody that is affected by the fires in Canada and throughout the United States. My deepest gratitude goes out to the firefighters, emergency crews, volunteers working around the clock to keep us safe. Thank you for your understanding. Now let's begin. Today we sit with Curtis Childs, Chief Visionary Officer of Swedenborg Foundation, host of the YouTube channel Off the Left Eye. Now, for years, Curtis has been helping millions of people explore life's biggest questions throughout the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, offering a thoughtful perspective on consciousness, the afterlife, heaven, spiritual growth, and the deeper purpose of being human. Curtis, welcome to The Returned.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry about your evacuation, and I want to echo what you said about the thanks to the people who are dealing with the fires. I had a cousin who was a smoke jumper. It isn't anymore, but a smoke jumper is you go get, if anyone's not familiar, you go to where the forest fires are, they drop you out of an airplane because there's no roads there, and you parachute in, backpack and camp and cut down, breaks so the fire doesn't spread. You just sort of think of, forest fires. Yeah, they're out there, they burn, and then somebody, I don't know, sprays them with a hose and they go out. There are people putting their lives on the line to try to contain that. So thank you to them.
Yeah,
and
it's actually amazing.
Pretty
what
great.
they do.
But I'm so happy to be here on your show. And it was great
Thank
getting to hear
you.
just a little bit more about you, before we started this up. And so I'm so excited to talk to your audience and hopefully have a conversation that's going to enrich people's day and lives.
Thanks so very much. Before we begin, I just want to thank you personally because after my near-death experience in 2017, I found myself searching for answers, and I didn't even know or have ever heard of near-death experiences at that time. So your work became one of the places I kept returning to. It introduced me to Swedenborg's writings and helped me make sense of many of the spiritual experiences that I was having. So having you here today kind of feels a little bit full circle for me. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, and it warms my heart for me to know that you were out looking and our content could be a part of you finding something. So that's why we do what we do. So I'm so glad to hear that.
That's right. And that's why I believe my audience needs to hear this. Whether they've heard of Swedenborg or whether they haven't, I'm hoping that this will bring some new perspective for them. So before we begin, I always like to ground the audience in who the person was before they became who they were. I know you've spoken deeply and openly about your struggles with depression. Would you feel comfortable taking us back to that time, who you were before Swedenborg entered your life, what ultimately led you to Swedenborg? And I also have one other question. I'd love to know if religion or spirituality played a role in your upbringing.
Great questions. And I want to start where you said that Swedenborg, if anyone doesn't know what that word means, it's the last name of I think the author of the most complete and long-running set of spiritual experiences anywhere in existence. There could be something, under a rock somewhere, but I haven't come across it. So, absolutely looking forward to if you have any interest in near-death experiences or spiritual things. I think Swedenborg is if you haven't heard of him, he's like a hidden treasure chest full of all kinds of information. So I want to do that. And you mentioned that Swedenborg was useful in making sense of your near-death experience and your spiritual experiences. To me, Swedenborg and what he found out about the way that the spiritual side of reality works and the way the human mind works, that helped me make sense of my own mind and of the experiences that I'd had in life. So I came at it sort of from the other side of it. This, like, what particularly, yes, I would say that I was interested in spiritual things when I was younger, but it was when you are struggling to swim, you're really interested in a life raft, and I was struggling to swim in my mind, and so it made me lock in on spiritual things and really investigate those seriously and look to utilize them in my life because I needed help. I needed help is navigating life. So yes, religion played a role in my upbringing. And actually, I grew up going to a church uh, where they would read Swedenborg there. So my parents read Swedenborg. I grew up in like a Swedenborgian community. So it was always around for me. I think that just because something's around doesn't necessarily mean you love it and you go crazy about it. I mean, the internet is full of people who had, various kinds of Christian or religious upbringings, and then now they are running the other direction, sort of deconstructing. They don't like it. But for me, it went the opposite way. And I think that it was a couple of difficult events that made it like that for me. I mean, when I was 6, we were in a car accident, my family was, and I had an older sister who was 8 and she died. And I think that I can't like really sort of piece together everything and the impact, but that was when I started to really like, what is going on here? Like, what is this life that we're in, and how do you make sense of this? And dying, I started to like, what is life after death? This all is not theoretical, it matters. So I think that kind of kept me sort of close and interested to the things that I would, hear and learn from people who were interested in Swedenborg's view of the afterlife and in God and in life after death and survival of consciousness. But I was not somebody who would thought that, oh, I'm going to go and talk online about religion, spirituality, and I don't know where you categorize Swedenborg. I feel like he's kind of uncategorizable in a lot of ways. So I'll just say somewhere between religion and spirituality and psychology and philosophy. That's kind of where it fits. But I did not think I was going to be that kind of guy. I was going to, at first I thought I would be a play in the National Basketball Association. I was going to be a basketball player, but you just if you saw photos of me when I was younger, you'd realize like, oh no, he's not going to go. But I didn't know that. I was too young. So I had that. Then I was going to be a musician. Everybody back then wanted to be a musician. But then I really fell in love with biology and the study of nature and ecology, and that was what I was getting my major in college. And and I knew like that the Swedenborg, the spiritual material was becoming more and more important to me. Like I kept needing it more and more. the more that I came up against, started to experience. I think I was 18 when I really started to have depression. But looking back, I had to just growing up, I didn't realize it or label it like that, but I had obsessive compulsive disorder a lot. I had a lot of anxiety. I had so much stuff going on, but it really started to come to a head when I was just like after high school. Um, and so I knew that that Swedenborg's writings and near death experiences, that was maybe when I was like 19 or 20. That's when I first really started reading near death experiences, and that was really enlightening to me. I knew that was all really important, but it was kind of like I didn't really talk about it with a bunch of people, and I definitely wasn't thinking about, oh, that would be a career of mine. But life just kind of unfolds the way it unfolds, right? And so that kept growing in importance. I switched majors to communications, and at one point, I got offered a job around a Swedenborg sort of thing, and I was like, I don't know if I want to be like publicly affiliated with that. But then okay, well, I'm sort of getting into it, and then it kind of took off, and now it's yeah, like that's what I do all day is I talk about spirits and life after death and correspondences and all this. I remember it was on Facebook where I had to make a page called Heaven and Hell. Heaven and Hell is the name of Swedenborg's best-selling book. It's the shortened title of Swedenborg's best-selling book of his spiritual experiences. And I remember like I had to make that page for some work I was doing with the Swedenborg Foundation. And I remember like it sent out a notification to all my friends that I'd made that. And I was like, oh, I hope nobody noticed that I would make some weird page about this weird spirituality thing. But it's not weird at all. And I think that why I love spirituality, and in particular Swedenborg's material, is I think it, right, like think about, back since I was grieving at a young age, it's like, how do you solve the big problems that nothing else is solving? How do you get it so that life, we can fix the stuff in life that needs fixing? And I think that's where the opportunity is in it. So I was, like I was fairly normal. I wasn't, like I had some background interest in religion and spirituality. I was doing some of those things, but it wasn't like, I was doing what I was riding bikes and, playing video games with my friends. It was like I was pretty regular, but it just became inevitable. I needed these spiritual tools to survive. And so it's like when you find something that helps you, you feel like obligated to share it. And so that's kind of where I started online. And then the response to it's been so much better than I ever thought it would be. So that's been really gratifying. And hearing like you, like I didn't know, like, do I just like this material because I was around it growing up? I'm habituated to it. But hearing from people like you that, oh no, this is really helpful to me too. That's like, okay, well, I got to keep doing it and see if we can't connect like the world of being interested in spirituality with day-to-day life and then with spiritual experiences, so that like people of all kinds can kind of center on a truth that you don't have to have had a spiritual experience to understand. But also if you have had spiritual experiences, how do you then just like go and live on Tuesday with how do you move around in the world with those things? So that's kind of how I got my origin story.
I love it. I love it. And I have all the books, to be honest. So I love the Heaven and Hell. Like it's a reread over and over and over and over. And it seems like when you read it, you just keep getting something new every time, or maybe your awareness is on something else. I'm not sure. But anyways, let's go into, for those who have never heard of Emanuel Swedenborg, let's talk about who he was.
I think that Swedenborg's was way ahead of his time. I think he would fit in, and the material he has would fit in much better now than it did back in the mid 1700s when he was doing. And I think the first reason I would say that is he was, I feel like, the first real documented crossover of spirituality and science. So this is when science had started to get going. It was nowhere near as sophisticated as it is today, but this is sort of Enlightenment era. People had really started to make discoveries. Technology was ramping up. You started to have more explanations for why the physical world worked like it did. And Emanuel Swedenborg was like a genius Renaissance man, polymath, like one of those people who was good at everything. So he was an inventor, and he had patents on everything from like mining technology for Sweden to military technology. He had sketches of like submarines and airplanes well before these things had been invented. He was also an anatomist. He had written extensively on human anatomy and was sort of one of the forefront figures for that. He was a geologist. He had studied just about every field. Back then, science was was a lot simpler than it is now. So you could kind of be at the forefront of every field. It was simple enough that one smart sort of person who applied themselves could get there, and he did. He was also a politician. Like, he was in the House of Nobles for Sweden. He was the assessor of mines for Sweden's mining industry, which at the time Sweden was like a world power, and their mining industry was a major. So this was like, it's like being the CEO of some major industry now. So he was doing a lot of that, and while he had his father was a bishop, like a Lutheran bishop. Jesper Svedberg was his name. So he had that in the background, but he was not a theologian. He was not any kind of clergy. I think he had a favorable opinion toward the idea of divine being and afterlife and everything. But then he, in his mid-50s, began to have some strange experiences. And another thing that's cool about Swedenborg is not only did he have a lot of spiritual experiences, but they're so well documented. So initially, he was keeping a travel journal that he started to record his dreams in, because he was having these increasingly meaningful, vivid dreams. It's been preserved, that journal. He didn't publish it, but it's been preserved and published as, I think there's a number of titles for it, but one of them is Swedenborg's Journal of Dreams. And what he does in there is he takes you through these dreams and tries to psychoanalyze his own dreams. Like, what, I keep seeing this black dog that tries to attack me. What does that mean? This is before the field of psychoanalysis. Like, there is no Freud, there is no Jung. Jung, by the way, Carl Jung, heavily influenced by Swedenborg, read a lot of volumes of his. And so I think that whole William James as well, who's called the father of modern psychology, heavily influenced by Swedenborg. Swedenborg, even though you've never heard of him, a lot of the things around you were directly influenced by him. And I'll get into that right after I finish sort of his biography. But he started to have these experiences, and the dreams started to become more than dreams. He started to have actual waking experiences. It culminated in these powerful, what we would now call like spiritually transformative experiences. And he said that in that, what he called it, his spiritual eyes being opened. So he gained at will access to the spiritual world. Like, when people have their near-death experience, they'll say, I went somewhere else, and my body was back there on the operating table, but I was somewhere else. He was able to go to that somewhere else for the next and last 30 years of his life, every day. And he kept a journal of it, and he published 30 volumes of what was so much extended experience around that. And what is maybe even more remarkable is that the world he's describing has so much crossover with the world that the near-death experiencers describe. So much so that, the term near-death experience, that was Dr. Raymond Moody, who came up with that in his book, Life After Life. And in that book, he devotes like a few chapters to parallels, because he was discovering that all these people in hospitals and all these people who had been revived shared this amazing story, the tunnel, and it had these characteristics. And he thought, well, this can't just be happening now in the 1980s. It must have happened previously. So he looked for historical records on, is there anything like this? And so there's just a few chapters where he compares modern NDEs to history. And he had the Bible in there. He had the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a couple other, and then Swedenborg, a whole chapter on Swedenborg. That there's this amazing crossover between Swedenborg's 18th century accounts in it. So Swedenborg, changed his output. He stopped publishing scientific works and devoted the last 30 years of his life to publishing spirituality works. But he kept he had his same scientist brain. So you'll find that his accounts, even Heaven and Hell, you said I love it too, and I find new things, but it's like it's very ordered and like this is why this happens, and because of this, this is this. It's what I think it can really add, and we have a whole near-death experience channel called the NDE files about this. Is it gives you not just like here's what the afterlife is like, but here's the physics of the afterlife. Here are the laws that make the afterlife behave the way it does, and then you can start to see those playing out in other near-death experiences and spiritual experiences. So Swedenborg, had a huge impact, as I said. Although he's not a household name, he was for a little while in like the 1800s in North America when Spiritism was in its heyday. Swedenborg was, you could see old newspaper articles where people would talk about him, but he kind of rose and fell with that. However, I mentioned the impact he had on psychology. Helen Keller, she wrote a whole book about how it was Swedenborg's concepts that allowed her to live the life that she lived. The city of Chicago, part of it is laid out based on Swedenborg's works because Daniel Burnham, the architect there, was sort of basing his White City plan on Swedenborg's description of a heavenly community. All the new thought that kind of led to the new age. I mean, all of that has it's come to some different conclusions now, but it had its roots in Swedenborg. And there's whole books that the Swedenborg Foundation has published tracing this very directly. There's a paper that just came out about modern public schools, like public education, was a group of Swedenborgians that came up with the concept of that. The first Parliament of World Religions, that was Swedenborgians who organized that. So there's a good chance that the world you know and inhabit was influenced by Swedenborg's concepts, even if you haven't heard his name. So I still think that there's, as far as I don't think that they have some of the vividness and storytelling of some other spiritual experiences, but I think you're not going to find anything like them for breadth and clarity of structure and to span everything from these far off spiritual experiences to how to live well and rightly and organize your mind in the present today. I just feel like I can't get enough of it. So but that's what we've been doing, is trying to make that accessible and share it with people.
Absolutely. I was curious, when you listen to modern day accounts, as you mentioned before, Swedenborg might fit more into modern times with his thinking. What similarities do you see between those experiences and Swedenborg's account of spiritual experiences?
Yeah, there's so many. I think that there's some basic features of the afterlife that are identical. So, and again, near-death experiences, there's so many of them and they're so different. You can't say every near-death experience says X or Y, but there are features that recur so much that this is a huge percentage of near-death experiences have this. So one of those is lack of space and time. So people will talk about how they don't know. So often they'll say, I don't know if I was in that state for, it could have been a year, could have been 3 years. I don't know. It didn't feel like that. And then also with space, they'll say we were all we had to do is think about somewhere and we went there and we're going incredibly fast. So that was a feature Swedenborg described over and over. He said the spiritual world does not have space and time the way the physical world was, but instead the spiritual world has states that you go through. So like states of mind. And here, he had an interesting take on language, that we develop idioms and ways of talking about things here based on the way it is in the spiritual world, because we instinctively kind of know that. So here we'll talk about like being close to someone. It's like, how close are you to your father? Well, I think he's about 4 miles away. No, like that's not what you say. You say that you're asking emotionally. Are you close emotionally to this person? So in the spiritual world, that's literal. So the more love you have for people, the closer you draw. Love is sort of like gravity there. People will talk about how the importance of love. Almost nobody comes back from a near-death experience not talking about, wow, love is so important. And Swedenborg categorize it. He talks in the beginning of his book, Divine Love and Wisdom, about how love is our life, that what you love makes you who you are, and in the spiritual world, draws you to people who are like you. This is a lot like the sort of law of attraction, but on a spiritual level. So he would talk about the way that love drives everything, matters, means everything in the spiritual world. He gives an account of what it's like to enter the afterlife, which has a lot of similarities about like sort of being pulled out of your body and able to move. He talks about the book of life, which I think modern NDEs would call it life review, but he talks about not just that you can revisit things from your life, but how they're recorded. He says we have an internal and an external memory. So the thing when you try to like, oh, did we do that last week or not? That's your external memory, but there's a memory imprinted on your spirit that is flawless and complete, and that's actually the thing that's being accessed in these life reviews. So a lot of similarities, and in some of the near death experiences you'll find things like there's one on neardeath.com where someone's talking about the way the sun looks and the way the moon looks, and it's just very exact on how Swedenborg describes things. But there's so many parallels that, yeah, we're able to do whole series on why the spiritual world is like it is, the power of thought and love there. And it just seems like, yeah, the people will use some different language for it, but it seems like there's a concrete reality that's being described from many different vantage points.
You know, Curtis, after everything you've studied, what do you believe happens in the first moments after physical death?
Yeah, I think it's not bad. I think it's not as bad. Everyone's worried about dying. I've there's no evidence that it's bad. It like looks bad, but so Swedenborg talks about how he was shown the dying process, and that right away you're surrounded by angels. And the angels are not just there, but they're like carefully managing and making sure that there's not any disturbing thoughts coming to you, that you're feeling safe, that there's like so much hands-on care about that transition. And then this is the most common refrain, I feel like, in near-death experiences is like, I was up looking down at my body and I was like, why is everyone so worried about that body? I'm happy and I'm free up here, and I don't want to go back. It's so great. So there's that. And then also you put that together with the actual experience of people who have had just traumatic events. I once talked to a paramedic, a guy who was an EMT, and he had this theory called the hurricane theory, which is like, a hurricane has an eye in the middle of it where there can be these incredibly strong winds that can knock over buildings and things, but there's this little circle in the middle where it's calm. And you can, like, people have taken video where you can actually look up and it's sunny and you're in the middle of this hurricane. But when somebody has, a life-threatening injury, accident, he had seen it all. It's really more like they're in the eye of the hurricane. Like they don't feel the pain. He says universally, when somebody has like a major life-threatening injury, either they don't remember when they wake up or they have some kind of near-death experience. And that actually, while they're in the middle, it's the rest of us that get hit by that wind, around dying. The rest of us feel like, oh no, this person's been hurt, and what are we going to do? That is actually where a lot of the pain happens. And I think you'll see this. This is whenever people in near-death experiences talk to people they know who have died, when Swedenborg talked to them, they're always saying like, don't worry about me. I'm okay. It's often us who actually have to process more of the grief and pain. So I think that I've never heard an account of anyone saying anything other than, "Oh, this is not as bad as I thought. Oh, why was I afraid of this?" And that was needless fear.
Absolutely. You know, Curtis, just a brief interjection. Um, when I had my NDE, when I woke up, I thought I woke up from what had happened. I thought I woke up, but I was just like, oh, I felt like me. I felt like I had a body. I don't know if I did, but I felt like it. I felt everything was normal. I just thought, oh, thank God, that's over. I didn't think anything else. I didn't know anything else. It literally felt like just like, oh, finally, I'm fine now. And
Mm.
then you look around and you're like, where am I? So I can attest to actually just not knowing any different. Very
Yeah,
interesting,
that's incredible. And
right?
I would just say, like, you saying, seemed like I still have a body. That there's a lot of near-death experiences where, even without thinking about it, yeah, or you see people that you knew in life, and maybe they look younger, but they have a body, like they're recognizable. And this was
Yeah.
something that Swedenborg was adamant that, yet you have a spiritual part of you right now, and you have a physical part of you right now. And the spiritual part of you is not just like some gas or smoke. It
Mhm.
is structured. It's actually, there's a whole spiritual body, and that's the only reason why your physical body can be alive and do what it does. There's not
Mm.
just one connection like in one part of your brain, which is ironic because that's what Swedenborg used to be looking for anatomically. He was
Mm.
looking for the seat of the soul. So he would, dissect, cadavers and look for, is it in the pineal gland? There was all these theories about it. Then he was trying to find where's the seat of what we would now call consciousness or the soul. And what he learned when he started to have these experiences is like your whole consciousness is spiritual, and the only reason that your physical matter can be alive at all is that there's spiritual matter that's like connected with it
That's
in every
right.
part. So he
Mhm.
would try to say, look, when you're a spirit, I know, and this is another thing that combines with near death experiences, is life does not seem less real on the other side. If anything, it seems more real. And he would
Mhm.
try to say, because in his day, I think even more than today, people thought about some sort of vague, dreamlike afterlife. And he's saying, no, when you're there, you can see things, you can touch things, you can feel things. We're just as actually, what we're doing here in the physical world is like the copy. The actual thing is there.
Yeah, that's what I've heard so many times. Now, how did he describe heaven?
Yeah. So another reason why I said that Swedenborg fits today better than he did then is like he will talk about a lot of Christian sounding things like heaven and hell.
Mhm.
But often his meaning is quite different. And so much so that he got, his works were put on trial for heresy at the Gothenburg trials, because there was a lot of things that he was saying that flew in the face of the church, the official church doctrine. And back then, that was a bigger deal than it is now, because the church was the government. There was a state religion. You couldn't say something against it. So he was well connected enough that he didn't get convicted, but it was a real thing. So one of the things that I think was most radical about what he was saying is that heaven is fundamentally, it's a state of mind. And eh, I mean, he would argue this is when Jesus Christ talks about the kingdom of heaven is within you. This is what he's talking
Mhm.
about. But that heaven is particularly the state, again, before we said everything is about what you love. The state of heaven is when you love being good to other people. The joy of being good or being useful to other people, that is what heaven is. So everything else radiates out from that. So yes, he went to the afterlife and he saw a place there that he called heaven and described. And it sounds a lot like the heaven from movies, or that you would imagine, as in beautiful landscapes, beautiful people there. Everyone loves everyone. There's amazing architecture. There's all this meaning. But all that comes from the love that people share there, and like very literally. So the physical world is like a matter and energy based world. That's what drives everything. Gravity. I'm not a physicist, but I know there's like electromagnetism. There's like the strong nuclear force. That's what you can trace back everything. Like it doesn't matter how much I care about something, I can't like love my garage into getting remodeled. Like it just doesn't. That's not what drives it. However, the spiritual world love is what drives everything. So and love and wisdom are what drive everything. So much so that like the landscapes he would go and find, he called any people that were in the state of heaven angels. That's what he meant. He'd say they're people like you and I, but when you get into this state of heaven, that then you're called an angel. And he would find these angels living in this community, and they had his amazing surroundings. But all of that was a reflection of what was in them. That there was this mechanism called correspondences, which meant that like your love for other people or for being good or useful, like if you pictured that, you could picture it like rolling hills or a babbling brook or the flowers, and it was all the good things in the minds and hearts of these angels that actually kind of manifested out and was contributing to the landscape, even affecting which kinds of animals would live there and everything. So there's this amazing place called heaven, but it all comes back to the state that's in the heart and minds of the people living there. And because of that, he said that you and I can be in a state of heaven right now. That fundamentally, your spirit can be in heaven while your body is here. And the way you get there is through cultivating this state of loving, being good to people, and enjoying and making the thing you pursue doing well to the what he called the neighbor or the common good or the people that you're around. So heaven, yes, heaven is like what you might think, but it's actually much more accessible and closer to home, because it's something that anyone from any religion can engage in by honestly and faithfully trying to live rightly by what they believe.
Hmm. So now I'm thinking hell must be the same,
That's exactly right. So
right?
so
It's a
it,
state
it,
and
it
it's a different state.
well, so love, Swedenborg uses the word love in a funny way. We usually use love to mean, are you a loving person? Then that's good. Do you love things? But Swedenborg was saying, like, okay, well, yeah, but you can also love all kinds of evil things. Like, there's people who love to bully other people. There's people who love the feeling of making other people feel small. There's people who love to control people. And I think the great psychological insight he has is like, why does the human race do all these terrible things to each other? Because it feels good, because people enjoy it. People enjoy feeling powerful. People enjoy dominating and taking the goods of others. And just like there's this heavenly state, which is the joy that comes from doing what is good, the state of hell is the joy from doing what's evil. So, like, when you're like, all right, this person made me so mad because they cut me off or something, and I'm going to lay on the horn, right? There's this, what he called the pleasures of insanity. Like, there's this satisfaction in being right, winning this argument. No one's going to know I did this, so I'm going to take this. Like, that's fundamentally, those things make for hell inside of each one of us. So you can kind of like, over your day to day, kind of visit hell and visit heaven as these different pleasures come up. So fundamentally, the state of hell is the joy you feel in harming people and in considering yourself alone and not the impact on others. Whereas heaven is another place he puts it, like feeling the joy in someone else as joy in yourself. Like that's the kind of love that comes from heaven. So yes, and similarly in the afterlife, he said that nobody's ever forced to go anywhere. Your own love brings you places. But if you have like a love, he was running in the circles of the European nobility and these sort of high crust members of society, and there's all kinds of terrible people there. There are people who were poisoning each other and swindling each other and doing all, and he would go and see them in the afterlife and after they had died, and you bring that with you. If you had nursed and loved revenge and plotted of like, how can I make it so no one knows I did this thing to this person, that's love as well. It's just the negative kind of love, and that too will pull you toward people who are like that, people who share a love of something that's negative. He would call those communities of hell, even though people who are there are like, what are you talking about? I love this. This is what I want to be doing, even though it comes with all these consequences, and that too affects the landscape and the way. So you find these like frightening places in the afterlife, just like many near-death experiences have these sort of frightening
Mhm.
elements to them
Mhm.
that people don't quite know what to do with. He would call that hell, but to him, he's saying that, look, everybody, you go to what you love. You go to what you love, and your love is your life. So yes, heaven and hell are states, fundamentally states within people, and just like in the world, like there's there's aspects of this world we live in that are have very heavenly, which is
Yeah.
like when people are getting along and people are using their unique talents to benefit things, and when people are caring for each other, that's like very heavenly. There's tons of stuff in the world that's like very hellish, where people are suffering and people are harming each other. What causes that? Well, it's like the choices we're all making, and
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
things we're nurturing and the things we prioritize over it. So it's like we're kind of creating heaven and hell here. It's just amplified in the spiritual world because there's it's much more direct. So yeah, to him it's like heaven and hell are there kind of all the time, and we are actually like between heaven and hell. This is why
Mhm.
you get human. It's so confusing to be a human, where you get like these helpful, loving impulses and thoughts, and like, oh yeah, I'll go do it, and then you get these confusing and negative and things in your mind that make you miserable and make you mean to people. It's heaven and hell, kind of both trying to
Mhm.
get an in. And so to him, he began to see this when he had his eyes open, that, oh, really, the choices we make every day can actually move our spirit, deeper and deeper into heaven or deeper and deeper into hell, depending on what we love and what we do and grab onto.
Oh, that is like music to my ears. I'm not kidding. Um, so you believe that we can actually create our own heaven here, now. We can live like we're in heaven now.
I mean,
Yeah?
we use that language, right? We use
Mhm.
that language, and you say, "Oh, you are like an angel to me."
Mm.
You say that to people who you got a flat tire, and somebody shows up and you don't know how to change it, and they show up and they do it. We were talking about those smoke jumpers, the people who are out there risking their lives to try save your house right now.
Mhm.
When the power goes out at my house and it's winter, and I see the Pico trucks, that's like the local energy company, going by, and it's freezing, and those guys are out there trying to fix it so that my furnace turns back on. um Absolutely, dude, absolutely. Like, what does it feel like when you're like, or let's say you're lost and you stop in to try to ask for directions, and somebody's like so nice and caring. Tell me there's not heaven there in that. When people
Mhm.
are, and Swedenborg also, I
Mhm.
think almost uniquely, he located heaven in not just like random acts of kindness, but in the usefulness you go do in your work every day. So you think
Mm.
about the people who try to grow food, like that's their job, and they're going out there and they're working the land, so that the rest of us can eat. Absolutely. Is there not heaven? And I'm going to try to make it so these people have
Mhm.
food. The people who are finding ways to, solve diseases and things that make people miserable. You think those people are going in. Swedenborg said, your vocation or your job can totally be the way that you bring heaven into the world. All you got to do is like do it honestly and faithfully and with an eye toward the benefit of others. So you're not like cutting
Mhm.
corners for profit. You're thinking about, how can I help? I mean, my wife teaches preschool, like 4 and 5 year olds. So, I mean, think about it. If she's going in there and really like, how can I help build the foundation of these people's lives? Absolutely, we can make heavens in all kinds of ways for each other. And I
I
think
love that.
you see it and you experience it all the time. You maybe just don't label it like that.
Right. Curtis, what do you believe the biggest misconception humanity has about consciousness, actually? And most importantly, what's the biggest misconception humanity has about ourselves,
Hmm.
in your words?
Yeah. Okay. So don't believe everything you think. Uh,
Mhm.
to me, this has been, especially me being someone who has dealt with so much the kind of mental illnesses that I have. So, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, those are all based in a whole bunch of negative stuff coming into your mind where you're trying to live your life and you're just hearing this, like not like actual sounds, but you get these thoughts all the time about what if this thing goes wrong, you're no good at this, that this is bad, you can't fit, just constantly pounding in on you. And um if you don't know how to handle that, it can just overwhelm you. And the thing that Swedenborg gives you is like, look, just because something's in your head doesn't mean you have to make it a part of you. Just because you have like
Mhm.
oh, I want to go and do this, or I want to go say that, you get to choose. You get to choose what you want to make a part of you and what you want to just let go by.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, and I've had this journey with this because even over the last couple of years, I've had this severe kind of form of OCD where I was worried like I had a tumor, but it turned out to be benign. But then I was like, oh, what if I get another one? It was just like health anxiety is what they call it. And so I
Oh.
had to, that was really
Mhm.
strong. I have a daughter. And so I'm like, am I going to die? And she's going to get all, introduced to grief at a young age and everything. So I'm like freaking out about that. And so it got bad enough that I had to go get, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like sort of the gold standard for treating stuff like that. Um, and, in there, I was so fascinated to find like, well, this is exactly like what Swedenborg says about like, because cognitive behavioral therapy and a lot of modalities like that are basically like you need to gain some distance between you and these thoughts. Like they call it diffusion, they'll call it challenge thoughts and identify thinking errors, but it's all to get it's like basically really sophisticated mindfulness. Like just because this is here doesn't mean it's you. So to me, Swedenborg gives you the backstory of why that is and why that stuff shows up in the first place. So to me, to think of yourself as rather than everything that comes into my head, that's who I am and that's what I am. Instead, everything that comes in, you think, do I want to have this as
Mhm.
part of me? And knowing that, yeah, there's heaven and hell, and heaven's going to be putting good, true things in your mind, and hell is going to be kind of the source in a broad sense of everything that's evil and false. And that so the false stuff is like, all right, I'm not going to. It's just like when I get all these calls every day on my phone that are I don't even answer them because I know it's spam. I know this is like somebody's trying to market to me, right? Um, think if I didn't like understand or believe in the existence of call centers. And I
Mhm.
was like, wait a second, someone's calling me. I better pick up. And then they say, hey, I need your credit card information. This is the FBI. Oh man, I better do that. Why would I not believe them? But once you know, oh no, there's like a whole thing where there's these big call centers and they have these methods and they're trying to exploit you for your credit card information, then I can just screen that and not pick it up. So it is with thoughts. And the more that you learn about spiritual world and how the spiritual world affects your mind every day, that gives you the why behind, oh yeah, even though this thought is really loud and insistent and it's saying I have to listen to it and live my life in the kind of fear it wants me to, that's just hell. So I know it's got its own motives and I don't really want that to be a part of me. So you don't act on it. You go and do something useful, which is exactly what cognitive behavioral therapy prescribes is like you
Absolutely.
devalue the impulse and then you go participate in something according to your values. So it's this cool kind of confluence of Swedenborg's spiritual description of reality and then modern psychotherapy coming together to give you the sort of the same prescription.
Absolutely. Curtis, if someone was listening today, um, that has lost hope, and maybe even terrified of dying, what would you want them to know?
Okay, don't lose hope because everything is going according to the plan. I mean,
Mhm.
if the last thing we just talked about wasn't my favorite Swedenborg idea, this one would be. It's called divine providence. So, divine providence, and Swedenborg devotes a whole book to this, is a description of the divine guiding of all events. And he's very particular about how this works. Like, yes, life has all kinds of unpleasant things in it. And no, you can't be guaranteed that unpleasant things won't happen. But what he saw very clearly is that everything that happens is being turned in. to spiritual good for you if you're interested in accepting it. And what that means is like, yeah, you have things with money, things even with people you love dying, those can go wrong, but the divine power is always making sure that that has a spiritual impact on you. So, how many people do you know that they struggled? Let's say like Bill Wilson, who struggled with alcoholism and it ruined his life. What came out of that was the 12 steps program. And if he hadn't gone through that, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. For what it's worth, Bill Wilson's wife was a Swedenborgian, and Swedenborg had a vision where there was like 12 steps leading up to this temple of repentance. So we don't know if that influenced the 12 steps or not. But I'm trying to say is like people who have grown deep and spiritual, they do it through often in the aftermath of hard things that have happened. So what divine providence is doing, given that everybody's going to die within 100 years anyway, and that your love makes you who you are, divine providence makes sure that in everything difficult that happens, it's changing your spirit, your deeper characteristics. Like you are learning what love is and how to choose that and how to not give in to negativity. Like it'll all be gone. All this other stuff will be gone, and then you're in this afterlife where what you love really drives everything, and everything in your life is carefully curated by the divine, so that even if it doesn't seem like it's going well now, it's going well for your spirit. It's all focused on what he called eternal outcomes, and I just was doing a show about this, that there's this thing called being in the stream of providence, where you trust that every little thing in life is carefully calibrated so that it will lead to you becoming a happier and happier angel in heaven eventually. That this is the way that, whatever negativity, ego kind of stuff gets flushed out of us, that we understand better how to love and be useful, even though right now you can't tell what's going on. It's leading toward that. He described it like think if you drove by a construction site but didn't know what a construction site was. You would think, what a mess. There are just these boards on the ground. There's a big hole dug there. How could anyone live here? This is a disaster. You could look at your life and say, look, this thing happened. Look, this is going nowhere. But the architect who has the blueprint knows, like, oh, no. That hole is there because we're going to fill it with concrete and it's going to do this. And in the end, there's like a palace waiting to be built. So it is with your life. You think you don't have any hope. There is like absolutely everything. The heart of providence is that there's a particular place in heaven for you. And what that means is like you can do something for the human race that nobody else can do. And all things in life are shaping us to become that person who can give some gift to humanity that nobody else can. So he talks about like, people who, if you become rich and get high position, don't let that make you think you're better than anyone. If you get downcast and get low position, don't despair. Just know God has taken us where he needs to take us to make us into the kind of angels that can be forever happier and happier, being forever more and more useful to the human race. So that don't lose hope. You don't know. Like it's like, you didn't realize you got this huge trust fund building up through your of spiritual riches, which is like your ability to love and be wise and become this particular kind of angel that nobody else can be. That's a guarantee that's happening in your life, because that happens in everyone's life. That is what divine providence is.
Absolutely beautiful. If Swedenborg was alive today, what message do you think he'd most want humanity to hear?
I think the message, there's like temporal messages about like the way that the world is and the affairs of things that matter. Even he in his day, like one of the last things he ever wrote was like something about inflation for Sweden's economy. Like he didn't think like, oh, be spiritual, go live off in a cave and don't care. Care about the world and try to make it better, because this is sort of the foundation. Like the spiritual world rests on it. Like we need to try to be engaged in the world and do good and make this into a heaven as much as we can. But you got to understand that this is unfolding according to the plan. Like, just like I said, providence is in an individual's life. Of course, it's in world events. It is in um, it is in like the arc of history. It's like things that seem chaotic, even though the world seems chaotic and like it's not doing anything. There's providence operating there too, just like your individual life is moving towards something good. He talked in particular about this new spiritual era that we're moving into. He called it the new church, which by he means like this sort of global thing where the human race is going to kind of get back to where we all understand and are connected to the spiritual world. Like we understand and know that there's an afterlife. There's going to be clarity about like how to be good to each other. There's going to be the sort of the best heaven on earth we've ever made. And he said that that's absolutely coming. He didn't say like when or how soon, but that's on the way. So I think he leaves a very fundamentally optimistic message. And just
Mhm.
understand that like just like in individual lives there are chaotic things that happen, so it is with societies, but there are processes to this. Like there individuals go through what he called spiritual crises, where we get overwhelmed and where things come up against us that seem too hard for us to deal with. But there's a reason. It's like it gets you to see things about yourself maybe you need to see. There's things that need to come out into the open. So it is with society. Like there are things that he says, the evils need to be seen before they can be removed. He talks about it like a wound you've got to clean out before it can heal. So a lot of things that might seem like, oh no, why is this happening? Well, I mean, if you look at some of the past tragedies in history, what comes out of that? How does society change the way it sees people? Some of the things that seemed like, oh, this shouldn't happen. It's like, no, this is part of a process. And with providence in your own life and in society, you can't really tell at the time what's going on. Like you can't say, I know exactly how this is. You just got to kind of trust then, but you can look back. He says you can look back at your life, like look back
Mhm.
10 years, 20 years, and you can start to sort of see, oh, wow, yeah, it's a good thing I didn't do that because I need to do this. And like for me with the work I'm doing here, totally, like I didn't plan it. It just kind of, it did its own thing. You can see little bits of how God does have things under control, and so it is with the whole world.
Mhm. That's right. That's right. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, Off the Left Eye. There's something that I absolutely love about that, and that is what off the left eye means. Would you be able to explain that to the
Yeah,
audience?
right. I keep forgetting how weird of a name that is. So the
Oh, I
story of
love it.
the story of Off the Left Eye is I was going to make a YouTube channel about Swedenborg, and I didn't really know what to call it. As I said, Swedenborg is sort of this, he's in between Christian mysticism, a little bit of like Buddhist philosophy, and spiritual experience. Like, what do you call him, and how do you not have people put it in a different box than it is? So I remember I was by my computer setting it up, and I had Heaven and Hell there, and I opened it up and was just like looking for what's a good phrase. And after a couple I thought about, there was Off the Left Eye, which is in his story about what it's like to wake up in the spiritual world. And there's like initially you're surrounded by all these heavenly angels, which are like the deepest angels. People are most in the state of heaven. And they kind of, as I said, they take care of your feelings. But then as he started to stir and kind of awaken, he said spiritual angels, which are more like knowledge focused, came around him, and he said it seemed as though a covering was rolled off my left eye, by which I gained the use of spiritual sight. So I just thought that sounded cool, so I put it in there. And since then, though, it's like, yeah, he's very adamant that like there's the intellectual side of you and then the volitional or the feeling side. So there's the mind and the feelings, and those things, they need to get along with each other. They need to, like, he described it like a marriage. Like they need to listen to each other and inform each other and love each other inside each of us. So it's kind of like the Off the Left Eye channel, like that's a bunch of information. Like we can try to give you some clarity on spiritual things, and then you do the right side. You would go and live it in your life and make it happen. So yeah, and it's funny too because that Off the Left Eye story, which he tells again in another of his books, slightly with some different details, but that's the place that's most often cited as being the similarity to modern near-death experiences. So it just so
Right.
happens that there's that crossover there as well. But yeah, off the left eye is when it seems like it's like the thing that drops away so that you can see things as they really are.
If people would like to learn more about Swedenborg and connect with your work, can you tell us where they can find and connect with you?
Sure. It's not hard. I mean, if you go on YouTube and just search Swedenborg, there's not very many people
Mhm.
making videos, but we'll pop up like crazy. We have a channel called Off the Left Eye. We have a channel called the NDE Files. You can find us there. If you comment on any of those videos, we have a team that will get back to you. We're the not-for-profit Swedenborg Foundation, which is a 170-year-old publisher. So we've got people to do that. If you want to go to Swedenborg.com, Swedenborg's books are available as free PDFs there, as well as you can order physical copies. So that's another way you can start. There's like an info at Swedenborg. You can email us there. It's not hard to get. We're a small organization. It's not hard to get in touch with me and with the team. So any of those are good. And if you have any questions or anything, we'd be happy to point you in the right direction.
Thank you. And I'll have all that information in the description box below. Now, Curtis, you're on the return, and here I believe that everyone returns with a truth, whether it's from a near death experience, depression, loss, awakening, a profound shift in perception. You've returned through your own journey. What truth do you believe humanity needs to hear right now?
Yep. The heaven is accessible to anyone, anytime, and that's because heaven is not dependent on circumstances or on control. It is like an opening to a certain orientation. The tools you have to look at what it is you love and to try to find the joy in benefiting others, that can lift you out of things at any time. It's not automatic, but it's something you got to cultivate. But there's nobody who doesn't have the means to access that wherever they are and in whatever situation they're in. So I really do think like it's there and it'll respond if you start reaching out. It wants you to reach out. So I really do think there's that to tap into whoever you are, wherever you are.
Ooh. Curtis, I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, your heart, and your lifelong pursuit of understanding. It has truly been an honor to explore these questions with you and to learn more about your journey. Thank you again.
Thank you. This was such a fun conversation. I love getting to be a guest here. Let's do it again sometime.
You bet. And to everyone watching or listening, thank you for being here. And if today's conversation reminded you of anything, I hope it is this: the search for your truth is one of the most meaningful journeys you will ever make, no matter how you get there. Until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.